You ever notice how the clones weren't supposed to matter? They were background extras, with matching armor and identical faces. Disposable soldiers in someone else's war. But somehow, they ended up stealing the whole show. And it wasn't with flashy powers or destiny speeches. It was with heart, loyalty, and a whole lot of trauma they never got therapy for. They were raised in a petri dish, trained to fight, and dumped into battlefields before they even knew what peace felt like. And yet, they still found ways to laugh, bond, and carve out tiny pieces of identity in a galaxy that saw them as numbers. That's not just good storytelling. That's a tragedy disguised as a children's cartoon. But the second Order 66 hit. It was like Star Wars just swept them under the rug. Like, oh cool, thanks for the body count. Now go disappear in shame. We never got the fallout. Never saw them wrestle with guilt or grief or the wreckage of their brotherhoods. They were the heart of the war, and the first thing to get erased when the Empire showed up. And yeah, sure, the Bad Batch threw them a lifeline. But even then, it felt like we were just scratching the surface of something way deeper, way darker, way more personal than any Skywalker meltdown. These guys were never meant to live long. But the ones who did, they had to figure out what to do with all that leftover pain. The craziest part is that the most human characters in all of Star Wars weren't even supposed to be human. They were clones, factory-made cannon fodder who somehow developed more soul than half the main cast, and we barely scratched the surface of their potential. In this video, we're diving headfirst into the forgotten legacy of the clones, why their stories hit harder than most Jedi arcs, and how shows like The Bad Batch proved there's still a galaxy of untold pain and purpose hiding behind those helmets. This isn't just about nostalgia. This is about giving the best soldiers in the galaxy the ending they actually deserved. You ever notice how the clones were supposed to be identical? But somehow every single one of them felt unique. It's weird, right? They all had the same face, the same voice, even the same training. Yet Rex felt nothing like Fives, who felt nothing like Echo, who felt nothing like Dogma, who was somehow the most painfully rule-following clone ever created. And the wild part is Star Wars just let them be complex. It didn't explain everything, and that made it all the more interesting. We never really got told how they developed their personalities, or how their brotherhoods formed so fast. But we saw it. We saw the handshakes, the banter, the unspoken loyalty that screamed louder than any Jedi mind trick ever could. We saw soldiers who weren't just following orders. They were choosing to be heroes, and that made you lean in just a little closer. Clone-centric episodes in the Clone Wars always had this energy, like we were stepping into the shadows of the war, not just the spotlight. You'd go from watching Anakin do something wild with the Force to a group of clones just trying to survive on Umbara, or figure out if their general was even sane, and somehow, that was more compelling than the lightsabers half the time. It's like the clones were built for curiosity. Every episode about them opened up new questions. Do they actually believe in the war? Are they just playing along? How much of them is programmed, and how much is choice? And why is it that the more questions we ask, the more human they become? That's why stories like The Bad Batch work so well. They don't answer everything, they just let us watch these guys figure it out in real time, and mess up along the way, and wrestle with who they are outside the war, which makes you wonder, how many other clone stories are still waiting to be told? Now here's what drives me crazy. After all that emotional investment, all that character development, all that bonding, the clones just vanish. Poof. Replaced by stormtroopers with bad aim and worse dialogue. Like, yeah, thanks Star Wars, that wasn't traumatizing at all. Order 66 was supposed to be their big moment, right? And yeah, it was brutal. But then what? We never really followed up. We didn't get to see the regret, or the consequences, or the internal war they had to face after betraying the Jedi. They were just phased out like a failed iPhone model. The saddest part of the clone story isn't that they died in battle. It's that they lived long enough to be forgotten. These were brothers born in a lab, given numbers instead of names, and trained to die for a republic that never really cared about them. And when that republic fell, so did they. Rex and Cody, and even Crosshair. These guys lost more than just a war. They lost their purpose, their leaders, their identity. They watched their Jedi generals fall one by one. Not just in battle, but in betrayal. And somehow, they were expected to just keep going. Like none of it mattered. You can see the pain in episodes like The Deserter, or The Hidden Enemy, or The Bad Batch Pilot. These aren't stories about victory. They're stories about survival, and the emotional toll of knowing that you were engineered to fight, but never really given a choice about what happens after. Even in Rebels, when we see Rex again, he's not triumphant. He's retired, isolated, haunted by a past he can't explain to anyone who wasn't there. And that's a pattern. These men were bred for war, and once the war ended, no one helped them process what came next. It's heartbreaking when you really think about it. They gave everything, and in return, they got erased. The galaxy moved on and left them behind. And yet, the ones who did survive still tried to live with dignity, even when no one was watching. But every now and then, Star Wars remembers just how powerful clone stories can be, and The Bad Batch was a prime example. It wasn't just another spin-off. It was a full-on love letter to everything that made the clones unforgettable in the first place. You had Clone Force 99, a group of defective clones who ended up being more loyal, more capable, and more human than most of the galaxy. Hunter with his intuition, Echo with his trauma, Wrecker with his heart tech, with his brain and Crosshair with, well, all his baggage. And it wasn't just about action sequences and blaster fights. It was about identity. About being forced to adapt in a galaxy that suddenly doesn't want you anymore. The show gave us politics, morality, heartache, and even a little parenting. Like seriously, who expected a clone squad to raise a kid and make it work? And that's the thing. We're not out of clone stories. Not even close. If anything, we're just scratching the surface. There's a whole galaxy of untold tales, just waiting for the right series to pick up the torch. What about the clones who defected and started new lives? Or the ones who refused Order 66 entirely and went on the run? Or the early days of the Empire when clones and stormtroopers were fighting side by side? But nobody trusted each other. Imagine a show focused entirely on Cody, dealing with the guilt of turning on Obi-Wan. Or a drama about Wolf and Gregor trying to disappear and survive. You could even do a mystery series where a rogue clone is tracking down his missing brothers across the Outer Rim. And then there's the real wild card, the next generation. What happens if the clones start teaching others? Passing on what they learned? Creating their own legacy in secret, far from the Empire's shadow? There's so much potential for stories that go deeper than lightsabers and space battles. The hope is there, buried in the edges of canon and hinted at in a few episodes here and there. Star Wars just has to want to dig it up. And when it does, it won't just bring back the clones. It'll bring back the emotional core the franchise has been missing. At the end of the day, this isn't just about wanting more clone stories because we miss the Clone Wars. It's about wanting stories that matter again. Stories that treat these characters like people, not props. The clones were never meant to be the main focus of Star Wars, but they became it anyway. Not because they were flashy, but because they were real. Flawed, brave, loyal, broken, and painfully human in a way most Jedi never were. Ignoring them now feels like a betrayal, not just of the characters, but of the fans who connected with them. It's like watching a friend vanish, and everyone pretending they never existed. And that's not just bad writing, it's missed opportunity. But here's the twist. Even with all the tragedy, even with all the loss, the legacy of the clones isn't over, because the fans haven't let it die. We keep watching, we keep remembering, we keep asking for more, and that means their story still has a pulse. So if Star Wars wants to truly reclaim its soul, it needs to stop chasing spectacle, and start revisiting substance. Because sometimes the most powerful stories aren't about chosen ones or prophecies. They're about soldiers, just trying to figure out who they are. After the war is over. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy my videos, please consider looking at my pinned comment and checking out the links for my Amazon storefront. It contains my favorite Legos, my gear in which I make videos, and comics that I read on a daily basis. I update it constantly, so please, take a moment and click on the link. On top of that, check out my second channel, Critical Analysis Hub Plus, and my third channel, Critical Analysis Hub XP. Just one click would go on a long way in supporting my channels and future in YouTube.